Hey guys, and welcome to Ozzie Reviews. Well, I thought I'd do a video on the ammunition restrictions that are allegedly coming in here in Queensland in 2018. Now there's a lot of argument at the moment and I see a lot of stuff online about this, but the details are still fairly sketchy. So I thought I'd do a video on this. I was going to do a post, but I thought I'd do a video because this is fairly substantial, and I just want to get the information out there to as many people as possible, not just on Facebook. So currently what's going on is there's argument about bringing in ammunition restrictions here in Queensland. This is supposedly going to go ahead in March of this year, I'm told. I don't know the full details, but what I've heard down the grapevine is basically to limit you on the amount of ammunition you can purchase and have stored at your place, and also the type of ammunition. So in other words, if you have a firearm registered in a certain calibre, well, you can't buy any other ammunition other than that calibre. So a lot of people on the face of it will go, oh, well, geez, no, that's quite sensible. No, I can see the need for that under public safety. And they start going along, following blindly and going, no, this is for the good of the people. You know, guys, I completely disagree with all of that, completely. And I'll tell you the reason why, okay, why I think it's just a farce in my view. Now, number one is, let's have a look at the incidents involving licensed shooters with ammunition abuse. Where's the ammunition abuse? Where have licensed shooters gone out on some killing rampage with thousands and thousands of rounds of ammunition, especially here in Queensland? Now, the only incident that we've had is the criminal use of firearms. Now, last year we had the incident at Gatton where a police officer was shot, and obviously the criminal who did that was unlicensed. Also using a illegally modified semi-auto rifle that was modified to fully automatic. So, you know, how would any restrictions on ammunition have solved that? I mean, obviously he didn't go to a gun shop to purchase ammunition. So how, by bringing in any restrictions on licensed shooters, are you going to prevent the criminal use of firearms and ammunition? You know, there's already the massive black market out there, so wouldn't resources be better put into policing that rather than bringing in restrictions on licensed shooters? That's my personal view on it. So why would a licensed shooter want to have a lot of ammunition stored at their place? Well, there's several legitimate reasons. Now, first of all is money, okay? You're obviously going to save a lot of money if you buy in bulk. Now, if you want to store ammunition here in Queensland, you've got to store it correctly and legally, okay? So basically, the explosives regulation talks about the ways that you can do that. I won't go into full details here because it'll sort of extend the video a bit longer than what I want, guys. But basically, you've just got to have it out of reach, of people who are unlicensed, and there's several ways to do that. As for the actual quantity of ammunition that you can have pretty much unlimited amounts of ammunition. However, if you have over 10,000 rounds of it, you need to have correct signs placed depending on how you're storing it, okay? Now that's only common sense, because obviously if there's a fire at your place and the fireys turn up, then they're going to want to see a sign and know what they're walking into. That is just common sense. So the system works fine. You need to have a license to be able to purchase ammunition. So I don't see any problem or need or requirement to go ahead and change that. So getting back to it, why would you want to be able to have unlimited amounts of ammunition? Well, for example, if you're wanting to save money, buying in bulk is going to allow you to do that. Depending on the exchange rates will ultimately affect what you will pay over the counter for ammunition here in Australia. And why? Because the 99% of ammunition is imported from the US. So if we've got a really low exchange rate, then obviously you're going to want to find ways to save even more, okay, because you're paying that inflated price. So buying bulk is the only way to do that. Or you may want to wait until the exchange rates are better, and then you'll buy bulk from there so that you can ensure you've got enough ammunition for quite a few years to come, so that when the Aussie dollar drops again, you're not paying through the nose for ammunition. Also, further to that, what if you're a competition shooter? And what I'm talking about here in particular is like a rimfire rifle competition shooter, so like bench rest rimfire. Now, those guys are very, very particular, and girls obviously. Now, when they actually get ammunition, I mean, they'll get a certain brand of ammunition and they'll even buy a bulk buy of that particular batch, if it shoots very accurately in their firearm, because they want something to shoot as consistently as possible, for their competitions. So, they can buy several thousand rounds of ammunition, especially rimfire, for someone to have 10,000 rounds of ammunition is nothing. So there's a reason there. Also too, like if you go to a range, and I've done it before when I've gone, to the pistol club, like I've gone at opening times before and I've practiced right through until lunchtime and I've shot 500 rounds of ammunition. So, if I've got time to spare, what if I go 5 days in a row to that range and shoot, 500 rounds of ammunition? Now, on top of that, what if you're a competition shooter and you're practicing for an upcoming event, whether it be overseas or here in Australia, and you really, really need to practice? Well, you're going to be sending a lot of ammunition downrange, and it's not going to be, obscure or out of the question for you to shoot 1,000 rounds a day downrange. So what if you're practicing for a month before an event? So this is what I'm saying that is dangerous, or why I disagree with a lot of these ammunition restrictions. On top of it as well, if you're at the range, what if, for example, you only have, say, a registered 22, but you want to hire one of the club, 243s, or if you're at a pistol range, you want to hire a 9mm. Well, how are you going to have ammunition for it if you can't acquire ammunition unless that firearm is registered to your license? So, if I'm at a gun store and I'm going to the range this weekend and I think, I'm going to try a 9mm pistol, I'll pick up a couple of hundred rounds of that, buy in a little bit of bulk and save some money. Well, why should I be restricted or prohibited from doing that? Or on top of it, what's stopping, and you can do that here in Queensland, is a licensed shooter lends their firearm to another licensed shooter, for up to 3 months. So what's stopping that person from being able to go and get ammunition? Well, obviously these ammunition restrictions, if they go through, will stop that, will prevent that. So, for example, if I borrow, a rifle from a mate of mine for a day, why should I be prohibited in obtaining ammunition for that rifle? Or why do I have to rely on him to get that ammunition to then give to me to use in the rifle? I just see all sorts of complications with that. And ultimately, let's have a look at it once again. What will that do for public safety? I just can't see any benefit. Also too, let's have a look at farmers and occupational shooters. Now, a farmer can live, how many hours from the nearest town that sells ammunition? Some farmers will live 8-9 hours from the nearest town that sells ammunition. So how are they supposed to go in and get multiple loads of ammunition because they're restricted to the quantity that they can acquire at any one time or store on their property? Okay, there's considerations there. On top of that, again, what about a feral pest controller? Now, I've gone out to contracts before where I've shot, 200 to 400 rounds in a day, no problem whatsoever, especially when you use a semi-auto. So if you're shooting that amount of ammunition and there's a restriction, well, what a feral pest controller is supposed to do? Just do a couple of days work, and then they too have to go into the nearest town that sells ammunition, to buy more? Or then they've got to charge the customer more because they're going to be paying overinflated prices in those remote areas, because obviously they need to cover their costs of shipping ammunition out to their store. So there's a lot of consideration there as well. So this is where I'm going with this, guys. I completely disagree with it because there's no incidents of licensed shooters abusing ammunition. And I just don't see the need to police a group of people or put that much effort into policing a group of people that, in my view, don't need policing. The system in place works with regards to ammunition. Why can't someone just simply go in, produce their license and purchase ammunition without worrying about, I can't have a certain amount or I can't have this caliber or that caliber? This brings me to my next point. Now, registration of firearms is also a complete farce in my own view. And why I say that, and a lot of people will be like, but Ozzie, it's about public safety and so forth. Look, I've heard all those arguments before, and I think it's complete BS. And the reason for that is because I've personally acquired, now let's go back to 1996 when they brought in registration of firearms. Now the argument there was that it was for public safety, okay? We had to have registration of firearms so the government knew who had what, all for public safety. Well, what it was for was it was setting up the building blocks for further restriction and confiscation of firearms. Now, I acquired a 223 and it took over a year for weapons licensing to send out the updated weapons list with it registered to my license. So that means for a year it wasn't registered to my license. But remember, public safety is paramount and the paramount reason for registration in their view. So how can that possibly be if I can have a firearm in my possession for a year before it even shows up on their system? Or those of you who have had the inspections, think about it. When the local officer comes around and does an inspection on your firearms, your safe there, how many times has it been inaccurate? How many times has there been firearms sitting in your safe that they don't even know about, that's not even on their list that they've brought round? That's why registration, in my view, is just completely a farce. But they needed to bring in registration to put in the building blocks for that future restriction and confiscation, like I say. Let's just have a look since 1996 what they've brought in and what registration has allowed them to do. But keep in mind, registration nowhere in the world has proven to solve or prevent crimes with firearms. It hasn't. So what's the reason? To bring in the restrictions, like I say. Let's have a look at what's come in since 1996. We've had magazine restrictions. I remember before they changed the law here in Queensland to limit pump action rifles or lever action rifles with detachable magazines to 10 rounds. Before that even came in, I got a letter saying that I can't use anything more than 10 rounds in my pump action Remington 7615, and they also put a condition code on my license because obviously they couldn't change the law, but they can impose whatever conditions they want or see as public safety, okay, on your license. So that's what they did. They put a condition code on there saying that I cannot have a greater than 10 round magazine with my 7615. So how did they do that? Well, obviously they didn't just pluck me out of thin air. Okay, they have a look at their database of registration and see who has these firearms, and that's how they then impose greater restrictions. The same thing with caliber restrictions. Okay, they can impose range templates and bans there on high caliber, or what they class as high caliber firearms, so 338 Lapua and so forth, so they can prohibit the use of those calibers on the range. So how does that affect you and I? Okay, so if you already have a 338 Lapua, well then they can send you a letter and say, well, you need to justify why you still need this caliber, because we see that you go to the range, but no ranges will allow those calibers. So unless you've got access to a very large property, which you'll then need to prove to us, I'm sorry, but you won't have a genuine reason for that firearm. And then they use that for people who apply for those calibers too. Any of you guys that have applied for 338 Lapua here in Queensland will know exactly what I'm talking about. Okay, and then the biggest thing, when we talk about actual firearm confiscation, let's have a look at the whole Adler debacle, the lever action shotgun debacle. So what's happened there? Everyone who has a registered lever action shotgun has been sent a letter saying they are limited to 5 rounds, and saying if they have anything greater than that, they're in breach of the legislation, or it will be moved to category D, they'll need that license, etc, etc. So they can't do any of that without registration, guys, and that's why I believe that is a farce. So bringing that back to the whole ammunition argument, this is why I'm so dead set against the restrictions on ammunition, because I know that what's going to happen is they're only going to use it as the building blocks for further restriction and confiscation in the future. What do I mean by that? What will happen is it may take 2 years, it may take 5 years, it may take 10 years. But say, for example, they limit it to 10, 20,000 rounds of ammunition that you can have in any 1 year period. Okay, that might be a lot less. I'm just plucking a figure out of my head. So what may happen in the future there is they'll tighten it. They'll go, oh look, we need to restrict people a little bit more, just a little bit more. So we've got to drop that down from 10,000 rounds to 8,000. And then there'll be a few more years on from there, and then they'll drop it down just a little bit further. And then all of a sudden, it'll get down to where it's 1,000 rounds of ammunition. Then it'll go down lower and lower. And then it'll be just ammunition that you're going to use on that particular day. Mark my words, it just gets tighter and tighter. And how can I be so confident about that? It's not because I have any inside knowledge or anything like that. It's very simple. Just have a look at 1996 and what happened and what restrictions we've had placed on us without any incident whatsoever. We have had ammunition like caliber restrictions, okay? And we have actually had ammunition restrictions like the ammo bill down in New South Wales. We've also had magazine restrictions where you can't use certain capacity magazines with certain different firearms. Then on top of it, we've had cosmetic appearance restrictions. Some states especially suffer that. You know, WA comes to mind, also Victoria, New South Wales. You know, how you can prohibit a firearm because of how it looks over its actual function is beyond me. But they do it. You know, they have moved firearms that are category A and B to category D just simply on their appearance and made them prohibited. For the love of me, I don't know how they get away with that, but they simply do, and that's a restriction or a number of restrictions we've had under that guise of cosmetic appearance since 1996. And then obviously, you know, what continues on from there is, you know, they've really been pushing now with the lever action shotgun restrictions. But this is very dangerous, guys, because what's going to happen next is they're actually going to bring in restrictions on pump and lever action firearms that aren't shotguns, okay? So in other words, your rifles, your Cat A and B rifles. Because as I've said numerous times till I'm black and blue in the face, I've said it, you know, they're going to bring these restrictions in. It was imperative that they got this lever action shotgun restriction through, because how can you possibly have under category B a limitation of 5 rounds on a lever action shotgun, yet a lever action and pump action rifle under category B is 10 rounds. They're going to go to the government, they're going to push hard, and I'm talking about Gun Control Australia in combination with certain sections of the government that are very anti-firearm, and they're going to rally up support to also ban and prohibit lever and pump action rifles from category A and B to a limitation on their magazine, okay, whether it be 5 rounds, 10 rounds, whatever. They're going to push, and then they're going to push harder and harder, okay, and then try to get reclassification. Like I said, guys, it's not inside knowledge, it's just simply paying attention and looking at how they do things since 1996. There doesn't need to be justification. Look at, once again, the whole Adler debacle. That was brought on and justified by what? You know, we had Jackie Trad saying it here in the Labor Party here in Queensland, talking about it was a result directly from the inquiry into the Sydney siege. No, it wasn't. It had nothing to do with that. Once again, we had Man Monis at the Sydney siege, unlicensed criminal who was on bail for manslaughter, I believe, who had an illegal, unregistered pump-action shotgun in his possession. So, once again, as licensed shooters, we all know, how is it going to solve a single thing by bringing in more and more restrictions on us, the licensed shooter? As I've said before, shouldn't that effort and all that money and manpower be put into policing the people that need policing, and that's the criminals, in my view? Anyhow, guys, a bit of information to take in with this. So what's the end result of it? What you need to be doing is you need to be sitting down with your local member and discussing the reasons why you don't want any support for ammunition restrictions here in Queensland. And I've already given you the reasons. I've given you many reasons in this video. Alright guys, remember, we've got to stick together, we've got to fight the common cause, because the antis don't give up. It is continuous. They keep coming back and back and back, and they will not stop until we've got nothing left. The sooner you understand that, the sooner that you can join myself and others and start fighting back, and you know, and meeting with your local member and getting on committees and all this sort of thing, and start actually getting out there and doing something so that you can ensure that we've got shooting for ourselves and generations to come under us. Alright guys, all the best with it, and I hope you enjoyed this review.